1 second, 30:00 minutes remaining. It started with a sound. Quiet. Subtle. Like a mechanical heartbeat. Beep. 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 In the sprawling Rossetti estate, wrapped in morning sunlight and silence, the sound was almost nothing. Just another electronic murmur among the buzz of kitchen equipment, the sweep of cleaning brushes, and the rustling of wind through the olive trees lining the cliffs of Palermo. Then came the scream. Papa! It was high, piercing, raw with fear. Don Vincenzo Rossetti didn't hesitate. He was out of his chair in an instant, coat falling to the floor, heart hammering as he ran toward his son's voice. He had faced gunfire, explosions, betrayals, but never that sound. The scream of his only son. He burst through the bedroom door and froze. Marco, just 12 years old, sat on the floor, shaking his back to the wall, eyes wide with terror. Strapped to his chest was a vest. Black. Heavy. Wrapped in wires. And blinking red at its core. 29:47. 29:46. 29:45. The room seemed to shrink around Vincenzo. His body locked in place, breath caught somewhere in his throat. For a long, terrible second, there was nothing but the sound of that slow, steady beep. It's on me, Papa, Marco choked out. I can feel it ticking. 2 guards rushed in behind the Don. One radioed in immediately. Code Black. I repeat, Code Black. We have an IED strapped to the Don's son. Lock the estate down. Within moments, the Rossetti villa became a fortress. Steel shutters dropped over every window with a loud hiss. Magnetic locks sealed all doors. Armed guards rushed into position. The massive wrought iron gate at the front of the property slammed shut. But inside, time was bleeding out. 28:59. Don Vincenzo dropped to his knees beside his son, voice TR00:00:01, 30:00 minutes remaining. It started with a sound. Quiet. Subtle. Like a mechanical heartbeat. Embling but low. Don't move, Marco. Don't move a muscle. I'm here. I didn't do anything, the boy cried. I found it on my jacket. I tried to take it off and it started blinking. Vincenzo studied the vest. Whoever designed it wasn't an amateur. This was professional work, tight to the body, pressure-rigged, hardwired with sensors. And someone had planted it inside his home. Who got close enough to do this? He growled. Who touched my son? No one answered. 4 minutes passed before 2 men in black entered the room, bomb technicians flown in months earlier from Milan. One carried a sleek black case. The other already had a headset on, syncing with an external systems analyst. They immediately knelt in front of Marco and began scanning. 26:33. Dual trigger system, one muttered. Pressure and motion. We lift it wrong, he goes up. Wiring is reversed, the other added. Decoys everywhere. Some are live, some are fake. It's a maze. Don Vincenzo stood silently. His face cold as steel. But his eyes betrayed him. He was breaking inside. 23:10. The text began slowing down. Tools hovered. Fingers trembled. This might be an internal loop, one whispered. If we cut here, the whole circuit could complete and blow. Then try another way. There is no other way. The seconds slipped away. 20:02. Marco tried to hold back tears. But he was a child, strapped to death, surrounded by grown men who didn't have a clue what to do. 17:40. We can't touch this segment, one tech said. It's fake wired. One cut and it trips the fuse. Then skip it. I can't. It's tied to the master line. 15:01. Panic now clung to everyone in the room. Even the guards were backing away. The older technician sat down, drained, hands shaking. I don't know what else to try. 14:35. Don Vincenzo looked at his son. At the blinking light. At the men who had failed him. He stood slowly. Voice low. Controlled. Then get out of my house. The room went quiet. The techs looked up at him, stunned. If you're done, then leave. The men backed away. One dropped his gloves. The other unplugged his headset. They walked out. No one stepped forward. No one had any answers. 10:58. The timer kept ticking. The bomb kept blinking. And no one, not even the most powerful man in Palermo, could stop it. Not yet. Flashback begins. Before the suits. Before the guards. Before the empire. He was just a boy. Vincenzo Rossetti was born in a fishing village along the southern coast of Sicily. His father was a drunk, loud hands, loud voice, and nothing but disappointment in his eyes. His mother was silent. broken. Gone before he turned 10. By 15, Vincenzo had dropped out of school. He learned the streets instead, how to fight, how to lie, how to survive. And above all, how to make people afraid of him. Fear, he learned early, was the strongest kind of power. He started small. A debt collector for a local loan shark. Quick with a knife. Quicker with threats. By 20, he ran protection for half the businesses in the port. By 25, he had buried the men who once gave him orders. By 30, he ran half of Sicily. They called him Il Fantasma, the ghost. Not because he disappeared, but because his enemies did. He didn't smile. He didn't joke. His men feared him as much as his rivals did. He trusted no one. Slept with a gun under his pillow. Built his life like a fortress, brick by bloody brick. Until her. Her name was Isabella. A schoolteacher. Graceful. Sure. Brave enough to look him in the eye. She didn't flinch when he spoke. Didn't shake when he entered a room. She saw something in him no one else did. "You're not a monster," she once said. "You're just tired of pretending to be one." No one had ever spoken to him like that. So he married her. The world called him dangerous. She called him husband. A year later they had a son, Marco. And just like that the ghost faded. The killing stopped. The gun under the pillow was put away. He made deals instead of threats. Business instead of blood. Isabella changed him. His empire grew larger, cleaner, more efficient. He cut ties with street gangs and focused on international business. Imported goods. Real estate. Quiet power. The old Don Vincenzo still existed. But he lived in the shadows now. Then one rainy night, everything changed again. Isabella's car flipped on a mountain road. The brakes had been cut. That's what the police said. But they never found proof. Just an empty road, a twisted car, and the woman who had brought light into his world, gone. The Don never said a word at the funeral. He didn't cry. He didn't speak. He just looked at the coffin like he was staring into his own grave. Something inside him shut off that day. The smile. The warmth. The softness. Gone. He raised Marco alone. Gave him the best teachers. The best doctors. The best life money could buy. And built walls around all of it. His estate became a fortress. He hired men with military training. Installed systems no one could break. Cameras. Lasers. Panic rooms. He made sure no one would ever get close enough to hurt Marco again. But now, they had. Back to present time. 1700 hours remaining. Marco sat in the center of the room, strapped to a bomb, pale and quiet. The blinking red timer on his chest was ticking down toward death. The technicians had done everything they could. But now their hands were shaking. Their words were stumbling. Their confidence was gone. The room was silent. The kind of silence that comes when no one has any answers left. Don Vincenzo stood still. His mind racing. His soul cracking. He had built everything to protect his son. Every wall. Every guard. Every dollar spent was for this one purpose. And now, the one thing he loved more than life was seconds away from being taken from him. He had never felt so helpless. Not when he was poor. Not when he was feared. Not even when he buried Isabella. And then, a voice. Soft. Come. From behind him. Let me try. Everyone turned. She was standing in the doorway. Wearing her gray maid uniform. Sleeves rolled. A cleaning cloth still tucked into her apron. Elena. The maid. No one had even noticed her standing there until now. She hadn't moved. Hadn't spoken. She had just been watching. A tech laughed, but there was no humor in it. You? You're a maid. Another scoffed. You don't know what you're looking at. This isn't some kitchen appliance. One of the guards stepped forward. Get out of here before you make it worse. But Elena didn't move. Her hands were at her sides. Her face was calm, focused. She looked straight at Marco, not the others. Don Vincenzo took a slow step toward her. His eyes, red with stress and fury, narrowed. You think this is a game? He growled. You clean this house. You fold towels. You think that qualifies you to touch a live bomb? Still she didn't flinch. Didn't raise her voice. She just said, let me try. One of the techs threw up his hands. Don, she doesn't even know the components. If she touches the wrong line, she's going to kill all of us, another shouted. A guard moved closer. Sir, don't let her near the boy. She doesn't have clearance, she doesn't have training, she. But Don Vincenzo raised a hand. Just one. And the room went silent again. He stared at her for a long moment. He had ruled men with iron fists and cold eyes. He had built his life around knowing who could be trusted. And this girl, he had never spoken to her for more than a few seconds. A maid. In his house for 6 months. Quiet. Polite. Invisible. But now, she was standing here. Looking at death like it was just another job. He looked down at his son, the boy he would kill and die for. He looked at the text, broken, panicked, giving up. Then back at Elena. If you touch the wrong wire, he said softly, we all die. She nodded once. I know. And you still want to try? Yes. The Don breathed out, slow and heavy. He looked at his son again. There was no time left. He nodded. That was all. Just a small, sharp nod. And suddenly the others stepped aside. The guards didn't argue. The text didn't speak. Because they had failed. Because maybe, just maybe, she could see something they didn't. Elena stepped forward. The blinking red light reflected in her eyes as she knelt beside Marco. She didn't touch him yet. She didn't reach for tools. She just looked, studying, mapping the bomb with her eyes. Marco looked at her, trembling. He tried to speak, but she shook her head gently. It's okay. Don't talk. Just breathe. Her voice was soft. Not nervous. It didn't shake like the others. It was calm, like someone who had done this before. The timer kept ticking. 02:54. Elena lowered her hands. Hovered them over the vest. No one said a word. Not even the Don. They just watched. As the maid prepared to face the thing none of them could touch. Flashback to young Elena with her grandfather. Her training and upbringing. Transition back to the present as she works on the bomb. The full disarming process. Ends with the bomb being defused and the emotional aftermath. The dry wind howled outside the old garage in New Mexico. Dust floated through the air, catching the orange light of sunset through a cracked window. Inside, a little girl sat on the floor, legs crossed, eyes focused. Her hands were small, steady, holding a wire cutter and a training circuit board. Across from her sat a man with tired eyes and strong arms, Hank Morales, her grandfather. A retired military bomb technician. War had hardened him, but it hadn't broken him. Not yet. Again, he said, nodding to the board. Elena Morales didn't complain. She didn't ask why. She picked up the tool, reset the switch, and started over. Which wire kills you? He asked. The yellow one, she replied without looking. And what do you do before touching anything? Trace the circuit. Check the power. Breathe. Good girl. It had been like this every day since her parents died. She was 5 when the accident happened. A car crash on a rainy night. She didn't remember the details. Just fire. And silence. Hank took her in and raised her the only way he knew, with structure, skill, and survival. No bedtime stories. No cartoons. No games. Only drills, blueprints, and rules. By age 10, she could disassemble a remote detonation system faster than most cadets in training. By 14, she could name 25 different types of triggers. By 16, she had nothing left to learn, at least not from her grandfather. When Hank died, she didn't cry. She packed up her life into a single suitcase and left the desert behind. She wanted peace. Silence. A place where no one would ask her to cut wires ever again. Italy offered that. A world away from the dust, war, and circuits. A world where she could be invisible. She became a maid. And for a time that was enough. Until today. The ticking filled the room again. Red numbers blinked like fire on Marco's chest. 02:30. 02:29. Elena's knees pressed gently into the marble floor as she crouched over the boy. The others stood back, silent now. Watching. Waiting. She reached slowly toward the vest. Her fingers never trembled. She found the outer wires, bright and obvious. Too obvious. Distractions, she whispered to herself. She traced them back. 2 of them didn't connect to anything. 1 looped under the padding. Useless. Fake. She didn't waste time. 02:00. She unclipped the cover plate over the power source. It was tighter than expected. She adjusted her grip and lifted it, revealing a nest of wires beneath. Each one looked real. Each one was a lie. She closed her eyes. Visualized the pattern. Start with the anchor, her grandfather used to say. Follow the current like a river. She found it, the true power line. Hidden beneath a fake node. She cut it. No change. She kept going. 01:30. The timer beeped faster. The room got smaller. Sweat rolled down her temple, but her hands remained steady. Another wire, green this time, was tightly wound. She traced it with her fingertip. The coating was thinner. Worn in a specific spot. Pressure sensor. She pinched it with her glove, held it tight, and cut it in one motion. Still no explosion. Still alive. 00:45. She paused. There it was. Tucked beneath the panel, small, dark, silent. A second device. A backup trigger. Whoever built this wanted no survivors. She reached inside the narrow space. Felt the components. There was no time to hesitate now. She found the lead. Cut the outer casing. Found the wire beneath. It was red. Of course it was. 00:17. She looked at Marco. His lips trembled. His eyes were locked on hers. She gave him the smallest smile. Then snipped the wire. 00:01. Midnight. The red light disappeared. No sound. No explosion. Just nothing. The bomb was disarmed. For a full 5 seconds no one breathed. Then suddenly Marco gasped. His chest rose in a sob. Don Vincenzo rushed forward, grabbing his son, holding him so tightly it hurt. The guards let out shaky breaths. One of the bomb techs sank to the floor in disbelief. And Elena? She stood. Quietly. Slowly. She said nothing. She didn't cry. Didn't smile. She just stepped back, as if she had only just finished mopping the floor. Like nothing happened. For a moment the air was light again. Marco was safe. The bomb was silent. Don Vincenzo held his son in his arms, his face buried in the boy's hair. The staff exhaled in disbelief, some crying, others whispering prayers of gratitude. The nightmare had ended. Or so they thought. Elena stood a few steps back, still quiet. She hadn't moved since she cut the final wire. She simply observed, eyes unreadable. No victory in her expression. No fear either. Just calm. Like she hadn't just walked through fire and come out untouched. Then a voice cut through the room. Oh, sure. I see. This doesn't feel right. All heads turned toward the corner where Don Marco stood. He hadn't moved during the chaos. He had watched everything, every second of the countdown, every mistake the technicians made, and every move Elena took. He was Don Vincenzo's right-hand man. Trusted. Feared. Loyal for 2 decades. He had handled executions, led negotiations, silenced enemies. If the Don was the heart of the empire, Marco was its fists. And right now, that fist was pointing directly at Elena. She's new, he said, stepping forward slowly. No formal training. No clearance. And somehow, she disarmed something 3 trained professionals couldn't. The warmth in the room evaporated. Elena didn't flinch. She didn't speak either. She didn't just guess right, Marco continued, his voice growing louder. She knew everything. Too much. Where each wire went. What to cut. What not to touch. Some of the guards shifted uncomfortably. One of the bomb techs nodded. She moved like she'd done it before, the technician said quietly. A lot of times. Another added, that wasn't luck. That was precision. Elena finally looked up. Her eyes met Marco's. Come. Unmoving. I did what none of you could, she said. And that's exactly the problem, Marco snapped. Who are you really? Who sent you? Don Vincenzo stood slowly, his arms still around his son. His eyes moved between Marco and Elena, confusion in every line of his face. I watched her, Marco continued. She came out of nowhere. No papers. No background check. Just showed up and started folding towels like she belonged here. One of the guards hesitated. Sir, she's been quiet. Never caused trouble. That's how spies work, Marco growled. They don't come in guns blazing. They come in smiling. Polite. Invisible. Until it's time. Elena's lips parted slightly, but she said nothing more. And think about the timing, Marco said, pacing now. The bomb is placed in the most secure room in the estate. With pressure sensors, false triggers, a secondary core. Someone inside had to plant that. Not a stranger. Not a thief. Someone who knew the house. Eyes turned to Elena again. She's the newest person here, Marco pressed. The rest of us have been with you for years, Don. She's the only one who doesn't belong. Don Vincenzo stared at Elena. His expression unreadable. The silence between them felt heavier than the air before a storm. Marco stepped closer to the Don. She played this perfectly, he whispered. Earn your trust by saving the boy. Make herself untouchable. And once we let her in, who knows what she'll do next. Elena finally spoke again, her voice low but steady. I didn't plant that bomb. Then prove it, Marco said. But until then she needs to be contained. Marco, the young boy, shook his head, looking up at his father. Papa, she saved me. Don Vincenzo didn't answer. Instead he gave a quiet nod to 2 guards. They moved toward Elena. The maid didn't run. Didn't argue. She held her hands in front of her, wrists together, ready for cuffs. She looked at the Don one last time. He couldn't meet her eyes. As they led her away, the celebration faded behind her. And in its place, suspicion. Rain tapped lightly against the windows as the storm inside the Rossetti estate quietly brewed. Elena sat in a locked room, alone, her wrists unchained now but her freedom still on hold. Outside, whispers passed through the halls. Some said she was a hero. Others said she was a snake. But the Don said nothing. Instead he made a call. And within the hour Inspector Falco arrived. No fanfare. No questions. Just a gray coat, a leather notebook and cold, calculating eyes. He didn't introduce himself with a handshake. He didn't offer comfort. He simply nodded and got to work. Falco was a man who didn't chase shadows. He peeled them back. His reputation was quiet but ironclad. Years of untangling mafia lies and double crosses had made him an expert in what most people couldn't see. Silence, hesitation, timing. He started with the house logs. Every door. Every access panel. Every room entered or left within the last 48 hours. Then came the security footage. The estate had cameras on every hallway, every wing, every entry point, except of course the Don's private quarters and his son's bedroom. He watched the footage twice, taking slow notes. Next were interviews. Staff, security, cooks, tutors, cleaners. Each one repeated the same thing. Elena was quiet, kept to herself, always working. She never wandered, never asked questions, never caused trouble. When it was her turn, Elena didn't argue. She told the truth plainly. I was in the kitchen this morning, mopping floors. Then I heard the scream. Falco reviewed the camera footage. Checked out. There she was, plain as day on the kitchen feed, mop in hand. She had stayed there for most of the morning until the moment the lockdown was triggered. There were no gaps. No unexplained movements. She hadn't left the wing. More importantly, she hadn't gone anywhere near Marco's room. Which left one question. Who had? Falco narrowed the search. Marco's bedroom was located in the east wing, a part of the estate restricted to only the most trusted. When he cross-checked the logs and footage, four names appeared. Don Marco, 2 elite guards, and the boy's private tutor. Each of them had the clearance. Each of them had been near the room within the past 12 hours. He started with the guards. They were nervous but cooperative. One was stationed at the front gate all night. The other had stayed in the surveillance room. Their alibis held up. Footage confirmed their movements. Then came the tutor. A gentle, nervous man who had been with Marco for over 2 years. Falco found nothing unusual. He had entered the boy's room the previous evening and left after 40 minutes, just like always. The footage showed him returning to his own quarters without deviation. Falco requested access to everyone's phones for digital forensics. He wanted full histories, messages, calls, encrypted apps. Everyone agreed. Except one. Don Marco. He stood in the middle of the study, arms crossed, jaw clenched. My phone's private, he said. I'm not some security grunt. I'm the Don's right hand. Falco didn't blink. I check everyone, he replied. No exceptions. Don Marco turned to the Don. His voice lowered, almost pleading. You can't be serious. After everything I've done for you? Vincenzo's face was tired. His eyes bloodshot. He hadn't slept. Hadn't spoken much since the bomb was removed. But now he stood. He stepped closer. Looked at the man he had trusted for more than half his life. His voice was quiet. Dry. I almost buried my son this morning. Don Marco didn't answer. The Don gave a slow nod. Give him the phone. There was no argument after that. Marco hesitated, then slowly pulled the device from his pocket and placed it on the table. Falco picked it up without a word, his gloved hands already unlocking the analysis kit from his bag. He didn't need emotion. He didn't need suspicion. Just evidence. And the truth was always hiding somewhere in the wires. The silence in the study was unbearable. Inspector Falco stood beside the long table, Don Marco's phone in his gloved hand. His eyes scanned the screen without expression. His thumb moved slowly, carefully, page by page. No one dared to speak. Don Vincenzo stood nearby, his hand resting on the back of a chair, as if it were the only thing keeping him upright. His son was alive, but the weight of what was coming next pressed heavier than any grief. Falco stopped scrolling. He tapped the screen twice. Then looked up. Encrypted chats. Multiple contacts. External routing. Hidden threads. But not hidden well enough. He turned the screen so they could see. A list of messages opened across the display, Cold words stripped of names but full of meaning. The language was code, but the intention was unmistakable. Dates matched. Locations matched. And one name stood out among the rest. Maples. A rival family. Old enemies. Hungry for a seat at the top. Falco zoomed into a thread. A timeline unfolded. Plans. Updates. Status reports. Each line detailed the execution of a plot that had nearly succeeded. Target the boy. Use a method that leaves no evidence. Create confusion. Shift the blame to an outsider. Wait for the dawn to unravel. Then strike. The entire thing read like a business proposal. Cold. Professional. A betrayal written in ones and zeros. Don Vincenzo's hand slowly slipped off the chair. His body didn't move, but his eyes, they darkened. He reached for the phone. Falco handed it to him without a word. The Don read every line. Slowly. Carefully. As if hoping he was wrong. Hoping it was a trick. A lie. A bad dream. But each word confirmed the same truth. This wasn't just betrayal. This was murder in slow motion. Behind him, Don Marco shifted. He cleared his throat. It's not what it looks like. The room remained still. I was keeping tabs on them. Gathering intel. You know how it works, Don? No response. I had to talk to them to keep us ahead. You planned to kill my son, Vincenzo said quietly. It wasn't a question. Don Marco raised his hands slightly, the gesture of a man trying to explain a lie before it collapses. Listen to me. It wasn't supposed to go this far. They pressured me. I thought if I gave them something small, they'd back off. But they kept pushing. Falco interrupted. There's more. He placed another document on the table. Printed from the message logs. It showed bank transfers. Offshore accounts. Payments routed through fake companies. Each one tied to Marco's name. Money for a job well done. Don Marco's voice dropped. I've been loyal to you for. Vincenzo stared at him. There was no rage in his face. No yelling. Just a slow, heavy sadness settling in behind his eyes. You broke my house from the inside, the Don whispered. You didn't just betray me. You tried to bury my future. Don Marco took a step back. His hand moved toward his coat. Two guards moved at once. No, Vincenzo said, voice sharp. The guards froze. Don Marco's eyes darted toward the doorway. And then he ran. But he didn't make it far. Falco stepped aside as two more guards entered the hall. The first caught him with a strike to the gut. The second drove him to the ground. He hit the floor hard. Face first. He didn't fight. Didn't speak. Didn't even look up. Don Vincenzo walked over, slow and deliberate. He stood above the man who had once been his most trusted. And for a long, painful second he said nothing. Then he looked down and said, You were my brother. Don Marco didn't respond. Vincenzo turned away. Take him, he said to the guards. And make sure I never see his face again. They dragged him from the room. Falco gathered the evidence silently, placing everything back into his case. The study was quiet again. But the silence wasn't heavy this time. It was hollow. The kind that comes after an earthquake, when the dust settles and you realize the shape of your world has changed. The cell door opened with a slow, metallic groan. Elena didn't move at first. She sat on the narrow bench, hands folded in her lap, eyes distant. Not angry. Not afraid. Just tired. A guard stepped in, careful with his words. You're free to go. She looked up. Said nothing. Then stood. No celebration. No rush. Just a quiet acceptance. The hallway outside was empty. No jeering staff, no curious glances. Word had spread. The truth had exploded like thunder through the walls of the Rossetti estate. She wasn't the traitor. She was the savior. And they had locked her in a cell anyway. Footsteps echoed down the corridor as she walked. Each one slower than the last. Her body was free, but her heart was still heavy. Not because of what had happened to her, but because of what she had seen. So much pain. So much fear. So much silence. When she reached the courtyard, the rain had stopped. The sky was soft, gray, as if mourning everything that had been broken. Don Vincenzo stood waiting. Not in his usual suit. Not with guards behind him. He was alone in a dark coat, his hair uncombed, his eyes hollow. He stepped forward. She stopped. For a moment, nothing moved between them. Not even the wind. Then slowly the Don dropped to one knee. It was not rehearsed. Not dramatic. It was real. A man once feared by nations was now kneeling in front of a maid. His voice cracked as he spoke. I failed you. She blinked but said nothing. I failed my son. I let fear blind me. I looked at you and saw a threat, when you were the only one brave enough to save him. He swallowed hard. I believed the wrong man. I turned on the right one. And I will carry that shame with me for the rest of my life. Elena's eyes dropped, not with pity, but with sorrow. She didn't want his kneeling. She didn't want his guilt. She just wanted peace. I'm sorry, he whispered. Forgive me. Elena stepped forward. She didn't offer her hand. She didn't touch him. But she looked him in the eye. I don't need your apology, she said softly. I just want this to be over. He stood, slowly, painfully. A man rebuilt in the ashes of his own mistakes. I owe you more than an apology. I don't want anything. You saved my son. I didn't do it for money. I know, he said. But I can't let you walk away with nothing. She started to turn away. But he stopped her. You'll never have to work again, he said. Not here. Not anywhere. She paused. I'm giving you 5%, he continued. Elena frowned slightly. Of what? My empire, he said. 5%. In land. In assets. In whatever form you want. I've already signed it over. She shook her head. That's too much. No, he said. It's not even close. They stood in silence for a long time. Then quietly she nodded. Not in acceptance of the money, but in understanding of what it meant. A man who had lost everything but found a second chance. And wanted to repay it the only way he knew how, with power. But she didn't want power. She only wanted peace. Do you know where you'll go? He asked. Back to where I started, she said. Back to where the silence is real. Not just survival. He looked down. If you ever need anything. I won't. A small smile, almost invisible, touched her lips. Thank you, she added finally. And then she walked past him. No guards followed. No whispers chased her. She disappeared into the gates, her steps slow and certain. He watched her leave. And for the first time in years, Don Vincenzo felt something shift in his chest. Not power. Not fear. But grace. The wind in New Mexico was different. It didn't scream like the city traffic or echo like boots on marble floors. It whispered, soft, steady, like the world was breathing slowly again. Elena stepped out of her new home and looked at the sky. The mountains stretched across the horizon like sleeping giants. The desert rolled gently beneath them, colored gold by the setting sun. It was quiet here. Just the way she remembered it. Her house sat at the edge of a small town, far from crowds and noise. One story, painted white, with a wooden fence and a creaky front porch. No gates. No guards. No cameras. Just space and silence. She bought it with cash. No banks. No names. Just enough. Enough to live. Enough to breathe. The mornings were slow. She rose with the sun, made coffee, opened her windows. Sometimes she'd sit outside with a notebook and just listen to the world. Birds. When. Nothing else. She had no maids. No staff. No visitors. Only peace. Her neighbors didn't know much about her. A polite woman. Quiet. Keeps to herself. Some thought she was a widow. Others guessed she was a former teacher. No one asked. She liked it that way. She had a small garden out back. Tomatoes, peppers, rosemary. The kind of work that kept her hands busy, her thoughts still. She built shelves. Painted her own walls. Fixed the pipes under the sink. The things most people called chores, she called grounding. There were no weapons in the house. No wires. No tools. Nothing that beeped. And yet, some nights when the wind was still, she'd step onto the porch and stare up at the stars. They blinked quietly overhead, each one a distant heartbeat. And in those moments she remembered. The ticking. The wires. The eyes of a frightened boy. The silence that came after the blinking stopped. It wasn't trauma. It wasn't fear. Just memory, tucked deep like a photo in a drawer. She didn't relive it. She didn't shake. She didn't cry. Because she had already faced the worst day of her life. And she had survived it. When it mattered most. She didn't freeze. She didn't run. She acted. She saved a child. Stopped a war. And walked away. Now life was simple again. She read books. Took walks. Helped at the local shelter when they needed an extra hand. Some days she said nothing to anyone. Other days she'd help an old neighbor carry groceries. It wasn't exciting. It wasn't dramatic. But it was hers. And that meant everything. No one here knew her past. Not the Mafia. Not the bomb. Not the betrayal. Not the kneeling Don or the 5% of an empire she never touched. She kept that chapter closed. Sometimes she'd receive letters. Still. No return address. written in simple ink. One had said, "He's thriving. Thanks to you." Another, "Your peace is well earned." She never replied. She didn't need to. Forgiveness had been given. Redemption had been lived. Now she just wanted air, dirt, stars. The nights in New Mexico were cold, crisp, clean. She would wrap herself in a blanket, sit on the steps, and sip tea slowly. The sound of crickets replaced the ticking. The hum of wind replaced the chaos. She didn't think of herself as a hero. Just a girl raised in a dusty garage by a man who taught her how to cut the right wire, and how to stay calm when the world caught fire. She had done her part. Now the world could spin without her. And she could finally, truly, rest. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more interesting stories.